With Ukraine, there's been so much information that has been debunked. And the truth has come out about the true intentions of why these world governments have been all targeting Russia for a while.
It's difficult to look at the It's difficult to look at some of the images and imagine that any well-thinking, serious, mature leader would do that. So I can't talk to his psychology, but I think we can all speak to his depravity. This is war. It is combat. It is bloody. It is ugly, and it's going to be messy. And innocent civilians are going to be hurt going forward. I wish I could tell you something different. I wish that wasn't going to happen, but it is going to happen.
The difference in response is just nuts.
President Putin actually sent a draft treaty that he wanted NATO to sign to promise no more NATO enlargement. That was what he sent us. And that was a precondition for not invade Ukraine. Of course, we didn't sign that. So he went to war to prevent NATO, more NATO close to his borders.
Flashback.
This is fundamentally not about NATO expansion.
It was never about NATO enlargement.
It's not about NATO.
It's not about NATO expanding toward Russia.
This was never about NATO.
It's absolutely nothing to do with NATO expansionism.
And it has nothing to do with NATO.
This is not about NATO.
It's not about NATO.
It's not really about NATO.
This is not about NATO.
Seriously, it's not about NATO.
This was never about NATO.
It was never about NATO. Let's be honest.
This doesn't have anything to do with NATO.
Nothing to do with NATO at all.
Yeah, he's claiming it's like security purposes, but we can see the clear reason.
But NATO is not the reason.
This is not about NATO expansion. This is about the democratic expansion.
Ukraine bans religious organizations.
We are protecting democracy right now.
Ukraine is banning political parties.
Because it's a democracy.
Ukraine restricts books and music.
It's about democracy.
Ukraine won't hold elections.
It's about democracy.
And it's not about NATO expansion.
This war in Ukraine is not about NATO.
It's not about NATO.
That's not about NATO.
It has nothing to do with NATO.
Nothing to do with NATO expansion.
It's not about NATO expansion.
Nothing to do with NATO.
It isn't really about NATO.
It's not about NATO.
It's not about NATO enlargement. In fact, it has nothing to do with NATO.
It's not about NATO encroaching.
It's not about NATO. NATO is just a fictitious, imaginary adversary for Mr. Putin and for Russia.
It was never about NATO.
That's not what it's been about. It's been about him trying to expand his sphere of influence.
Hang on, I mean, the two are not mutually exclusive. Obviously, Russia has wished for a sphere of influence over Ukraine, but if the West had not challenged Russian interests so directly, I think that there was a chance to avoid this war.
He wanted us to sign a promise never to enlarge NATO. We rejected that.
The reason why Putin invaded Ukraine is because of his evil.
It's
about that Putin wants to rebuild Soviet empire of evil, like President Reagan told.
It's about Putin being sick.
I don't know how you negotiate peace with a madman, but
Nobody negotiated with Hitler.
People are comparing him to Hitler.
And remember Hitler.
He's a Hitler.
We're back when the Nazis invaded Poland.
This is exactly the same what Hitler was doing to Jews.
This is the same. Putin will not stop.
Putin is reminiscent of Hitler.
This reminds me of Hitler.
Hitler.
He's the new Hitler.
Well, Hitler.
This is about a butcher trying to kill people everywhere in the world, just not Ukraine, Syria, all over the place.
I hear you. Senator Lindsey Graham, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, straight ahead.
They're sitting on $10 to $12 trillion of critical minerals in Ukraine. They could be the richest country in all of Europe. I don't want to give that money and those assets to Putin to share with China. If we help Ukraine now, they can become the best business partner we ever dreamed of. That $10 to $12 trillion of critical mineral assets could be used by Ukraine and the West, not given to Putin and China. This is a very big deal how Ukraine ends. Let's help them win a war we can't afford to lose. Let's find a solution to this war. But they're sitting on a gold mine to give Putin $10 or $12 trillion of critical minerals that he will share with China is ridiculous.
How do you actually say Russia has a network of white supremacist groups that are going to commit terrorist acts when all over the media, including like the BBC and mainstream,
it's Trump's fault.
There's dudes with with freaking Nazi symbols on their uniforms. Even the Western media has said point blank, the Christchurch shooter, Ukrainian neo-Nazi Azov battalion. Everyone knows the Azov battalion. Everyone sees the photos. Everyone see. What did you see? A Russian with a Nazi symbol on there?
Two words: dynamic narratives.
But it's like.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy trying to
we make up
square
stuff.
this circle.
They make up stuff as they go along.
They
can just flip it on its head from one week to the next. But what happened last year, what we said last year, what was true last year is no longer true if it doesn't fit the narrative.
And not only that, but John Kirby says, yeah, for the past 8 years, we're funding them.
We've been planning to have a war with Russia, is what he said.
And we've been planning to have a war
via Ukraine.
I would remind a couple of things. One, the Biden administration was flowing in weapons well before the invasion. The first $1 billion that the president committed to Ukraine did include lethal assistance, and that was before Putin decided to move in. Plus, we were very open and honest about what we were seeing the Russians do. And then the last point, which I don't think we keep in mind as much as we should, Neil, is the training and effort that went into getting the Ukrainians ready for this kind of war over the last 8 years. The United States, Canada, Britain, other allies really helped train the Ukrainians in small unit leadership, command and control, operational maneuver, the kinds of things you're seeing them do now. It's not just about the weapons. It's about the skills and the capabilities that they and the leadership that they're exerting on the battlefield. And that wasn't by accident. They really have transformed from a Soviet era, very Russian dominant sort of military, very top down, rigid, doctrinal military, to one that's much more Western aligned in terms of the way they think and act and actually encourage initiative on the battlefield. Again, that wasn't an accident. That was the work of the United States and so many other allies over the last 8 years.
With smoke bombs and drums, some 3,000 members of Ukraine's nationalist Azov battalion marched through the capital, Kyiv. In a show of force, they lit flares outside the parliament building. It was a warning to the government against making any potential deal that would lead to elections in separatist-controlled territory of eastern Ukraine. The Azov battalion was formed in 2014 to fight Russia-backed separatists in Ukraine's east and is now part of the Interior Ministry's National Guard. They also called for Ukraine's borders to be fully restored. The battalion's leader vowed there would be more protests outside parliament if the government failed to heed their warnings.
We had some amazing displays of democracy in the British Parliament this week. There's Boris Johnson with the color-coordinated Azov flag, coordinated with his suit and hair, and members of the neo-Nazi Azov battalion in Congress. And we've been hearing so much about anti-Semitism, but I haven't seen any major pro-Israel or Jewish group condemn this display of reverence for Nazism, for a battalion that was founded by Andrei Beletsky, who declared that its mission was to lead the white world in a crusade against the Untermenschen. That's Andrei Beletsky, who was honored and with a Medal of Honor by Volodymyr Zelensky only a few months ago. What was Boris Johnson doing here, Aaron? I mean, what was the point of this?
Well, he's campaigning for increased military assistance to Ukraine.
My message to you is very simple. Thank you to the heroes from the Azov Brigade who warned us about their presence tonight. Give the Ukrainians what they need. Give them the weapons, give them the authorization to use those weapons outside their own borders if necessary. It's now absolutely ludicrous that Ukrainians should be forbidden from doing what Putin is doing himself and attacking Ukrainian forces. Why on earth shouldn't Ukrainians be able to attack Russian forces mustering on their borders? Give them those weapons, give them the attackers, give them the budget, give them the air defenses that they need. It's the single best investment that we can make in the defense of the whole Euro-Atlantic area, is supporting Ukrainian heroes. We rely wholly on heroes such as the people who are here tonight with us from the Azov Brigade.
I mean, recall that the U.S. Congress banned assistance to the Azov Battalion because they are neo-Nazi. This was a law passed after many attempts by Congressmember John Conyers, late John Conyers. It finally passed a few years ago. It still, I believe, is on the books. I don't think it's been rescinded, but everyone just ignores it, and everyone just ignores that we used to openly call them what they are, which is neo-Nazi. And now that's all forgotten, and Boris Johnson can go and call them heroes and lobby for them to receive direct U.S. assistance to strike across the border.
Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland seemed to admit the quiet part out loud when it comes to United States investment in Ukraine.
By the way, we have to remember that the bulk of this money is going right back into the U.S. economy to make those weapons.
A standing ovation for Ilya Samoilenko, called sign Gandalf, officer of the Azov Regiment of the National Guard of Ukraine, defender of Mariupol.
Israeli Friends of Ukraine invited me to the country to have some interviews, some meetings, to show the real face of notoriously known Azov Regiment, because I present my unit right now. We're not the guys that the Russians have been telling that we are. We were invited to the Knesset, and that's a great honor. I visited Masada as a very sacred place.
Well, one of the most scandalous reports now shows that another key U.S. ally, Israel, is in fact arming some of these neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine who have carried out attacks on ethnic and religious minority groups, including the Roma and also Jews inside Ukraine. Journalist Asa Winstanley wrote about this for the website The Electronic Intifada in an article titled, "Israel is Arming Neo-Nazis in Ukraine." Asa Winstanley's report reveals that the neo-Nazi militia, the Azov Battalion, which is part of the Ukrainian National Guard, posted online propaganda, including video showing it using Israeli Tavor rifles. As I said, the Azov Battalion, which began as a neo-Nazi militia, is now incorporated into the Ukrainian National Guard and is fighting pro-Russian separatists. And in Asa Winstanley's report, he also quotes a letter from the Israeli Defense Ministry that it wrote in response to a lawyer who had requested an end to Israeli military aid to Ukraine, citing the reports of Nazis attacking Ukrainian Jews and also Roma in Ukraine. Joining us to discuss this is Max Blumenthal. Max is an award-winning journalist and the editor and founder of the website The Gray Zone Project, where he has reported extensively on the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Max, previously here at The Real News, reported on how the United States has directly armed Nazis in Ukraine by arming the Azov Battalion. And in fact, the Azov Battalion has posted photos on its website showing it meeting with American military officials. So today we're going to talk about how Israel, which claims to defend international Jewry, is in fact arming Nazis in Ukraine. Thanks for joining us, Max.
Great to be on.
So can you just respond to this shocking report from Asa Winstanley that Israel, which again claims to speak on behalf of international Jewry, is arming anti-Semitic, violent neo-Nazis in Ukraine?
Yeah, it would be shocking if to those who didn't know Israel's history. This actually didn't shock me at all, especially given the fact that U.S. Congress has enacted a prohibition on selling arms to the Azov Battalion this year, thanks to the efforts of Representative Ro Khanna. I'll explain why a little bit later, but just to summarize this really excellent report by Asa Winstanley, which is really authoritative in explaining the origins and ideology of Azov and the danger they present to Ukraine and to Europe as a whole. The Defense Ministry of Israel has confirmed several shipments of arms and tenders for weapon sales to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian military. The Azov Battalion has posted photos of its soldiers on its own YouTube channel and social media channels with the Tavor rifle. And the Tavor rifle is one of the most distinctive weapons in the Israeli arsenal. It is the standard issue rifle for Israeli soldiers. And, it was recently used in some of the atrocities committed on the border of Gaza. And it replaced the Uzi, which is another really distinctive Israeli weapon. So there's no mistake here. This is clearly an Israeli weapon, and it reflects what was seen in the Israeli Defense Ministry documents. which were turned up by Israeli human rights lawyers and were obtained by ASA and the Electronic Intifada. And basically, the Israeli Defense Ministry has refused to deny shipping weapons to the Azov Battalion. The reason that they have kind of some plausible deniability about directing weapons to neo-Nazis is that the Azov Battalion has been incorporated into Ukraine's National Guard through the Interior Ministry, which is run by an ultra-right nationalist named Arsen Avakov. So Israel's basically just sending weapons to the Ukrainian military, which is now filled with hardcore neo-Nazi ideologues. But there's no disputing the truth of the headline to Asa Winstanley's article. Israel is arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine. The self-proclaimed Jewish state is literally arming neo-Nazis. And that should shock everyone, but at the same time, it's not shocking given Israel's history, which I can kind of briefly explain. But Canada recently sent its military attaché, Colonel Brian Irwin, to meet with Azov officers. And Canada has had to actually defend this meeting in an official statement to Asa Winstanley. And they said that, I mean, this is absolutely pathetic. They said, I'm not quoting directly, I'm paraphrasing, that they aim to encourage diversity and tolerance in Ukraine through these person-to-person contacts. So, you know, there's nothing like arming neo-Nazis to encourage tolerance, is there? It actually speaks to the ideological tendencies of the foreign minister of of Canada, who is a Canadian-Ukrainian, Chrystia Freeland, whose grandfather was a Nazi.
The federal liberals under attack from opposition parties and Jewish groups after a Ukrainian veteran who served in a Nazi military unit in World War II wasn't just invited to hear Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky speak in Parliament on Friday, but received a standing ovation from all sides of the House of Commons.
In his remarks, Mr. Rota said that he fought against the Russians. Well, he was a part of the 1st Ukrainian Division, which is also known as the 14th Division of the Waffen-SS, which was a Nazi division. And how do we know that Mr. Hunka was a part of that? Well, he's posted about it extensively on the internet. He put a number of blog posts up in 2011 discussing his involvement in it. There's a key quote I want to read for you here. In July 1941, the German army occupied Barhanzi, which is a city in Ukraine where he's from. We greeted the German soldiers with joy, he said. He also posted a number of pictures of him in 1943 when he signed up to fight alongside this 14th Waffen-SS division, including pictures of him training in Munich in 1943. So there is clearly no doubt from his own words that he has associations with this Nazi division.
We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian-Canadian war veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98. He's a Ukrainian hero, a Canadian hero, and we thank him for all his service. I wish to apologize to the House. No one, including you, my fellow parliamentarians, or the Ukraine delegation, was privy to my remarks prior to their delivery.
what he has done has caused an international incident. It is not just a domestic error. This is an error with international global ramifications. He has walked basically into a diplomatic landmine. Yesterday, in an interview with the Polish ambassador to Canada, the Polish ambassador actually said, in our opinion, this man, this 98-year-old Ukrainian veteran, should have never been invited into Parliament in the first place. Not only that, he should be prosecuted. And then today, we understand that the Polish education minister now is asking for the extradition of this 98-year-old military veteran to Poland to face charges on war crimes.
Judy, has Canada reached out to Poland? Have we heard from the Prime Minister on that front?
The Prime Minister has not said anything about Poland specifically. This is an issue of geopolitical importance. Poland ambassador to Canada made this point to CTV News and on Question Period that he feels that an apology is also owed to Poland, because in the area in which that Nazi unit was fighting, the SS Galician, that area is now Poland. So basically, what the Polish ambassador said was that, you know what, not only did Jews die at the hands of this voluntary military Nazi unit, but so did Poles. And that should be acknowledged. And that hasn't been acknowledged yet by any parliamentarian. They focused mainly on apologizing to Jewish survivors, to Jewish family members, as well as to Canadians, but who fought against the Nazis. But they have not made a specific apology to Poland.
Hey there, how you doing? I'm not shaking your hand, bro. You're a piece of man. Why is that, sir? You the entire country. You got our buddy over there.
Yeah, but how did I mess up this country?
Can anybody afford a home in this day? You're charging people carbon tax. You got 9 V8s here idling for 30 minutes. Your carbon footprint is increasing. We're getting charged for what?
You know what we're doing?
It's not stopping. No
carbon. We're putting a price on pollution,
right?
And we're returning it to families like
yours. I don't think so. You're sending it over to Ukraine, right?
No.
Yeah. You send it over to the guy that you were with that slaughtered his own country.
You've been listening to Putin, have you?
Putin? No. Definitely don't listen to.
Отвратительным выглядит то, что все аплодировали этому нацисту. И особенно президент Украины, в жилах которого течет еврейская кровь, еврей по национальности, стоит и аплодирует нацисту, не просто последующему нацистов, не просто идейному последователю, а именно человеку, который своими руками уничтожал еврейское население. Это он лично уничтожал. Если спикер канадского парламента говорит о том, что во время Второй мировой войны этот канадско-украинский или украино-канадский нацист сражался против русских во время Второй мировой войны, он не может не понимать, что он сражался на стороне Гитлера, а не на стороне его собственной родины, Канады. Или был фашистским коллаборационистом. В любом случае сражался на стороне нацистских войск. Допустим, он этого не знает. Я ни в коем случае не хочу обидеть чувства канадского народа. Мы относимся к Канаде, несмотря ни на что, с уважением, особенно к людям. Но если он не знает, что во время войны против России сражался Гитлер и его приспешники, то он идиот. Он, значит, просто в школе не учился, не имеет элементарных знаний. А если он знает, что этот человек сражался на стороне Гитлера, и называет его героем Украины и героем Канады, то он негодяй. Или так, или так.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he never planned to honor the 2014-2015 Minsk agreements to create peace between Russia, he said in a recent interview with a German magazine. Now, while he never planned to honor the agreements, he was elected on the promise of ending the Donbas war. In the interview, Zelensky also reportedly accused the West of being insufficiently supportive of Ukraine, despite the billions of dollars the U.S. has sent in aid before the war began last year and ever since.
Angela Merkel said something about the Minsk Agreement of 2014. She said, and I quote, "The Minsk Agreement of 2014 was actually meant to give Ukraine precious time to become stronger. Now the question is, to become stronger for what? To prepare Ukraine for a war with Russia. Now this automatically reveals the intention of the West. The Russia-Ukraine war was already pre-planned by United States and European countries. Angela Merkel has been in power for over 16 years. Therefore she knows what she is speaking. And I personally feel she spoke the truth."
Roman Protasevich muss sofort wieder freigelassen werden. Alle anderen Erläuterungen für diese Landung des Ryanair-Flugzeuges sind vollkommen unglaubwürdig. Das Gleiche gilt für seine Partnerin Sofia Sapega.
When you're a high-ranking official talking about diplomatic efforts in Ukraine, the last thing you want to do is drop your guard.
From the Maidan Revolution in 2014, the US State Department and CIA staged a coup to overthrow the government in the Ukraine. The neo-Nazi Azov battalion were used as muscle, and the regiment was supplied with weapons from the military-industrial complex, and still are. The Azov battalion and regiment received backing from Ukraine's interior minister in 2014, as the government had recognized its own military was too weak to fight off the pro-Russian separatists, and relied on paramilitary volunteer forces. These forces were privately funded by oligarchs, the most known being Igor Kolomoisky, an energy magnate billionaire and then governor of the Dnipropetrovsk region. The fact that a Jewish oligarch is funding neo-Nazi paramilitary forces should give some pause for thought. In addition to Azov, Kolomoisky funded other volunteer battalions such as the Dnipro 1 and Dnipro 2, Ada and Donbass units. Azov received early funding and assistance from another oligarch, Serhiy Taruta, the billionaire governor of Donetsk region. In 2015, Andriy Dyachenko, the spokesperson for the regiment at the time, said that 10 to 20% of Azov's recruits were Nazis. The unit has denied publicly that it adheres to Nazi ideology, but Nazi symbols such as the swastika and SS regalia are rife on the uniforms and bodies of Azov members. For example, the uniform carries the neo-Nazi wolf's angel symbol, which is a black swastika on a yellow background. In January 2018, Azov rolled out its street patrol unit called National Druzhina to restore order in Ukraine's capital. Instead, the unit carried out pogroms, which is a violent riot, incited with the aim of massacring or expelling an ethnic or religious group, particularly Jews. In this case, they went after the Roma community and attacked members of the LGBTQ community. Maybe that's something to bear in mind for all the people flying the Ukrainian flag together with the pride flag in their bio on social media. Ukraine is the world's only nation to have a neo-Nazi formation in its armed forces, a correspondent for the US-based magazine called The Nation wrote in 2019. How could the neo-Nazi movement get such influence in the Ukraine? Well, let's have a listen to a leaked intercepted conversation between Victoria Nuland, lead U.S. point person for the 2014 Maidan Revolution, and Jeffrey Pyatt, the United States ambassador to Ukraine. The call took place in January 2014, right before the protest movement started to escalate.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now. So we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yachts. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you think, what, in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking, in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay, good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
My understanding from that call, but you tell me, was that the big three were going into their own meeting, and that Yats was going to offer in that context a three-way, the 3+1 conversation or 3+2 with you. Is that not how you understood it?
No, I mean, that's what he proposed, but I think just knowing the dynamic that's been with them where Klitschko has been the top dog, he's going to take a while to show up for whatever meeting they've got, and he's probably talking to his guys at this point. So I think you reaching out directly to him helps with the personality management among the three, and it gives you also a chance to move fast on all this stuff and put us behind it before they all sit down and he explains why he doesn't like it.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay, I've now written, one more wrinkle for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah,
okay.
I saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. And again, the fact that this is out there right now, I'm still trying to figure out in my mind why Yanukovych did that. But in the meantime, there's a Party of Regions faction meeting going on right now, and I'm sure there's a lively argument going on in that group at this point. But anyway, we could land jelly side up on this one if we move fast. So let me work on Klitschko, and if you can just keep, I think we want to try to get somebody with an international personality to come out here and help to midwife this thing. And then the other issue is some kind of outreach to Yanukovych, but we probably regroup on that tomorrow as we see how things start to fall into place.
So on that piece, Jeff, when I wrote the note, Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So okay. Biden's willing.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thanks.
I was waiting for the communist call. I didn't ask for sunshine and I got World War III. I'm looking over the wall and they're looking at me.
Of course, it's all just a conspiracy theory. What about the Ukraine and biological weapons? Just another conspiracy theory. Right? But let's make sure and check in with Victoria Nuland again. The following recording is from a hearing in the US Senate in March of 2022.
I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning.
There is a suggestion for Nuland to contact Klitschko directly to play to his top dog sensibilities, while Nuland refers to getting the United Nations involved in a political solution. And that's where the unfortunate comment arises.
I'm obviously not going to comment on private diplomatic conversations, other than to say it was pretty impressive tradecraft. The audio was extremely clear. Hello, how are you? Good to see you. We're here from America. Would you like some bread? Please take something.
Thank you for coming here. This was Nuland and Pyatt visiting Independence Square in Kiev in December, handing out food to protesters and police. This latest episode is embarrassing for the US and allows Russia to argue that the opposition is being manipulated by Washington, something that Barack Obama has always denied. The clip was said to have been posted online by the Russian deputy PM, but that has not yet been confirmed.
Igor Kolomoisky, Ukraine's best-known oligarch, has a complicated history with the president. For years, Zelensky's company has produced shows for Kolomoisky's biggest TV channel, 1+1. In 2019, Kolomoisky's media channels gave a big boost to Zelensky's presidential campaign. After Zelensky's victory, Kolomoisky kept up his relationship with the president, nominating over 30 lawmakers to Zelensky's newly established party, and maintaining influence with many of them in parliament. He also backed a new political project, which has 24 lawmakers. The first year of Zelensky's rule was a revival for Kolomoisky. The oligarch was able to secure control over Ukernafta, a state-owned petroleum producer where he owns a minority stake. In 2020, Ukernafta was supposed to be cleared of all debt and receive a new independent director. Kolomoisky was able to stall the process and keep a favorable CEO in place. Until recently, Kolomoisky held his grip on another state company, Centrenergo, which controls 15% of Ukraine's energy production. After Zelensky took office, Kolomoisky began milking Centrenergo by selling it overpriced gas and receiving cheap electricity in return. Kolomoisky even helped sack the pro-reform government of Prime Minister Oleksiy Goncharuk, who tried to pry the oligarch's grip from Centrenergo.
Ждете, я вам скажу, будет это или нет. Кофе будешь пить?
Это ваших рук
Кофе
дело?
будешь пить?
Пойдемте пить кофе.
Да, это наших рук дело.
Слава нафтовиробникам! Слава! Слава! Слава!
Спасибо. И вам спасибо за сотрудничество. Тебя Коломойского, блядь, надо увидеть. Сидишь тут, блядь, и караулишь, блядь. Как тёлка, блядь, своего неверного мужа.
Ukraine's parliament has given initial approval to a law that would ban religious organizations with connections to the Kremlin. Kiev accuses the Ukrainian Orthodox Church specifically of collaborating with Russia after its invasion of Ukraine last year. The church has said it's not aligned with the Russian Orthodox Church. A second reading of the bill is needed before it becomes law.
If you've forgotten who she is, let me introduce you to Marina. This is the Marina we're talking about, the so-called artist who has decades of offensive, very satanic-appearing art that is especially suspect when it comes to children. Here's some of her art. This photo says, with a sharp knife cut deeply into the middle finger of the left hand. Eat the pain. I'm not even going to attempt to describe what's going on in this. That's a bunch of children's bodies, and that over there is a bone that's been shredded. Let's pretend there's nothing weird about this lady and it's all just an act. Why would she be the person you'd ask to help be an ambassador to rebuild schools with vulnerable children in them? There's also a photo of her with a nude child that I'm not even going to put on here because it is absolutely disgusting that they consider it art. So I'll show you this instead. This doesn't scream, I know how to rebuild schools to me. How about you? She certainly wouldn't be my choice, but what do you guys think? What expertise does Marina have that qualifies her to help rebuild schools for children in Ukraine? Let me know in the comments.
Evening, the Israeli and Ukrainian presidents gathered for an official ceremony for the unveiling of a new interactive memorial, Crystal Wall of Crying, by world-renowned performance artist Marina Abramovic. The wall is meant to be a symbolic extension of the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem and incorporates crystals from the Ukraine and Brazil in an interactive installation. The 40-meter-long structure now stands in a park built over the site of the Babin Yar ravine.
It's a really wall for healing, and it's wall to remember, and it's wall to public to actually interact all the time. It's not something, I don't like monuments that you have the huge monument and you stand in the front and you look to the monument. It's just like you're voyeur. Here, you have to touch, you have to interact, you have to turn, and you have to, confront yourself with yourself and your own memory. So it's a very different way of seeing art and seeing the monuments.
At the ceremony, both Israeli and Ukrainian presidents also warned against repeating the mistakes of the past and cautioned against a new surge of anti-Semitism.
More dangerous than Hamas, more dangerous than Muslim neighbors are internal these, and there's another biblical name, these who say they are Jews and are not.
I was going to ask you about that. In Revelation 3:8, I think, I was going to ask you that question. Does that refer to this time, or can it refer to this time?
It can. It's Revelation 3:9. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Yeah. And there's a different application for it, but we understand this is really there's a practical storyline I've shared before on a program maybe a year ago, I don't know, about the Khazarian mafia and the Khazarian Jews, and I'll just say the briefest understanding of it and how this applies to them, because it's about 1,000 years ago. Really, these are almost like marauding tribes, not like tribes of the tribe of Israel, but they're based out of the Ukraine, ironically or not, based out of Kiev. And these were those that would go around, take new lands, and they were known, they had brought the Babylonian religion with them. They were doing cannibalism, human trafficking, no boundaries, sex interaction. They were so wicked that the story goes that he who led, I believe he was a Tsar of Russia, when he had won a battle against him, gave him an option. And in some way or another, this is a truth that they were told, again, 1,000 years ago, you must choose a religion. You all are worthless people. You're not training your kids into any kind of civility, reasonableness. And he gave them a choice of the three Abrahamic religions, and the three Abrahamic religions being either, at the time we'd say Catholicism, Christianity, the other one is Islam, and the other was Judaism. And so they, in a very pragmatic way, the Khazarians chose Judaism because the Pope and the Vatican, they were very hands-on, forcible conversions. And so it was not a light thing to go under that, nor was it Islam. It's a heavy yoke on both, and so Judaism would leave them alone, and so they did some things of incorporating some level of they weren't, first of all, they were not Semite.
But, I mean, you're literally denying their existence now. I mean, you are just a brazen anti-Semite, aren't you? You hate Jewish people, you hate Israel, you hate the state of Israel, its government, everything about it. You're blaming them you've blamed them in this interview for literally absolutely everything.
When you say, well, I think most of the problems today is caused by Jewish supremacy. I believe that.
Europe! Europe! This is Europe! Europe! Europe!
Только там 1488. Там скажи, что...
пароль 1488?
Ну, потому что это 16-го года, я там молодой, глупый был.
Нацик, бля?
Бывший, сейчас не. Ну и как понять нацик, я понять не могу, что такое нацик.
Фашист, бля?
Нет.
Да хули нет, бля? Что такое 1488?
Это...
14 слов Дэвида Лейна, бля. И 88, блядь, это порядка номер букв латинского алфавита. Хай Гитлер, бля. Хули нет, бля?
Я об этом не знал.
Germany shows its leadership in the support for Ukraine. Germany is the biggest European contributor of military aid to Ukraine. You just decided to send a third Patriot system to Ukraine. And I strongly believe that other allies should follow the example of Germany.
Що ти з його кинув? Андрійко! Ти чого з його кинув? Бери булочку, чекай, я вкушу. Угу. Андрій, ну давай ще раз. Єбати з його кинув, бро, хорош.
You harassed us on the beach.
Yeah, and what say it?
Huh? And we have it on video. We have it on video.
For me, this
Can you say it again?
yeah?
Huh?
For me, this land is for Israel, yeah? They buy it, yeah?
Oh, wow.
Always be there's another part.
Well, you're sick, man. You're sick.
I'm sick.
Yeah, you're sick.
Take a little politics. You know what's happening in your country?
Oh,
like you're
God.
not looking, yeah?
Yeah, I
You're
know.
a child, you're a child,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't have a break.
And you're a man
You're
child.
living like I'm living in paradise, I have a so super nice life, but you don't know nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah? What
Yeah.
your religion?
Yes.
Yeah? Your
Yes.
religion person, what?
Yes.
You don't know nothing about.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like animals.
Yeah, yeah.
And you try to make it from me something like I make it something else that only I tell you.
Или построим на территории Украины новое государство Израиль, Израиль 2.0 называется, либо Украина исчезнет как государство. Михаил Дубинянский, вот автор этой статьи, он ушел от вопроса. Он предлагает построить Израиль на месте всей страны, что я считаю политически безграмотно, и это большая политическая ошибка. Потому что новый Израиль 2.0 должен построен быть на месте, как Небесный Иерусалим, вместо 5 южных областей, на месте 5 южных областей Украины. Но то, что главная украинская политическая газета печатает программную статью, с которой согласна редколлегия, это говорит о том, что наши 1,5 года нашей работы по продвижению проекта «Небесный Иерусалим» не прошли даром.
Всем шалом. Я Роза Розенфельд, референт проекта «Небесный Иерусалим». Я буду с вами в течение сегодняшнего интервью, и я надеюсь, вам понравится. Располагайтесь поудобнее перед вашими телевизионными приемниками. Желаю вам приятного просмотра.
You know that one time when the US helped neo-Nazis overthrow a democratically elected president? Do you know what country I'm talking about? But before we get started, you should brush up on basic facts about the US's involvement in regime change throughout history, because we've been doing this all over the world for more than 100 years now. Although we sped up considerably after World War II with the founding of the CIA. That brings us to Allen Dulles, the godfather of the CIA, who was a very wealthy and influential businessman, largely because of his deep ties to big Nazi money before and after World War II, and I guess during too, actually. And after World War II, the CIA helped set up a whole bunch of what they called stay-behind operations, which is just a way of saying they funded militias that were mostly leftovers from the Nazi party in Europe, because the Nazis hated communism, and so they just were like, yeah, these guys are useful, let's keep them around. We also poached all the Nazi scientists during Operation Paperclip. And so all of that is just to set the stage and remind you that the US is great at overthrowing governments, usually democratically elected ones, usually because they are too friendly with Russia. And the anecdote is usually to put dictators and far-right extremists in power that will bend the knee to the US. And also just to remind you, refresh you, that the CIA and the US in general have no qualms about working with Nazis and neo-Nazis. So, now it's time to learn the real history of the war in Ukraine. Because apparently Putin nearly bored Tucker to death with a 2-hour-long history lesson, so we'll do it faster and with sources. Maybe I'll get my very own smear article from the Daily Beast. So in 2010, Ukraine elected this guy, Viktor Yanukovych, to be their president, in what were hailed as remarkably democratic elections, given the awful state of Ukraine at the time. Yanukovych happens to be from Donetsk Oblast, where he was previously the governor. That would be this dark red one, where Russian is the native language of more than 75% of the population. In fact, this whole side of Ukraine is largely ethnically Russian. And he was logically very pro-Russia. I mean, like, they are literal neighbors. But anyways, that was not cool with the US. And it was also not cool with all of the Nazis in Ukraine, like tons of Nazis. And if there's one thing the CIA is good at, it's at not letting a good revolution go to waste. And they actually were totally out in the open this time. John McCain himself went and dined with the opposition leaders, including the far-right Svoboda Party, which would eventually take over. He literally shared a stage at the public protests with the leader of this party. This is back in December of 2013, leading up to the US-backed coup in 2014. And back then, everyone knew that Ukraine had a real Nazi problem. Here's the EU talking about it back in 2014. The Svoboda Party is a far-right party launched in 1991, and it took on this swastika-like symbol composed of I and an N, which stood for Idea Nazi, or Idea of the Nation. Literally, that was their logo, until they had a whole rebranding later on. Like, for real, this was an actual Nazi symbol used by Nazi divisions called the Wolfsnagel during World War II, and that is the Svoboda Party's symbol. This article is also from 2014 originally, updated in 2017. Regrettably, the vaccine against the virus of Nazism produced at the Nuremberg Tribunal is losing its original strength in some parts of European countries. That's a quote from Vladimir Putin. Remember when Canada got all confuffled because they accidentally had a standing ovation for a Nazi war criminal when baby boy Ukraine came to give a little speech and they all stood up and applauded the old Nazi war criminal? If that was confusing to you as to why and how that would happen, the answer is because a ton of people from Ukraine are old Nazi war criminals. Ukraine is full of Nazis. In fact, most of Ukraine's military fighting power is because of Azov Battalion, which is the direct descendant of the Svoboda Party that took over in the 2014 coup. Azov actually reached out around the world and recruited neo-Nazis from foreign countries to come get training to fight in Ukraine. They were banned from Facebook for racist and anti-Semitic content. They titled one of their pages Gas Chambers. But when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and we all wanted to make a lot of money off of it, some media outlets changed the way they described Azov and Ukraine in general. German state-owned media outlets like Deutsche Welle, which once described Azov as a neo-Nazi regiment, soon began labeling allegations of neo-Nazism as Russian propaganda. My, that's a familiar story. Because the United States literally, openly, financially, and politically supported a neo-Nazi militia terrorist group to take over the government of a democratic Ukraine. And then Crimeans, who are ethnically Russian, voted overwhelmingly to join Russia. And then the bulk of Western media abandoned any hint of even remotely balanced journalism. And now we're comparing Putin to Hitler and completely ignoring the actual neo-Nazis that are committing pogroms on the streets of Ukraine. The leader of Ukraine's most distinguished fighting battalion, Azov Battalion, once wrote that Ukraine's mission is to, quote, lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. He is now a deputy in Ukraine's parliament. And the stories of Ukrainian Nazism are not coming from Russian media. They're coming from Western media, like Radio Free Europe, like Jewish organizations like the World Jewish Congress and the Simon Wentz whatever center, watchdogs like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and Freedom House. Post-Maidan Ukraine is the world's only nation to have a neo-Nazi formation in its official armed forces. And sorry, if you don't know what I mean when I say post-Maidan Ukraine, that might be because they decided on a more like nice sounding Wikipedia name. They called it the Revolution of Dignity instead of the original name, the Maidan Revolution. Because when neo-Nazis take over a democratic government, it should be called the Revolution of Dignity. So now put yourself in Putin's shoes in 2014. The CIA has just overthrown the government of your next door neighbor. Think Russia overthrowing the government of Mexico. And they have installed a Nazi party as the head of it. And then that Nazi party is going through the streets where they're all ethnic Russians and killing people. I mean, not to mention the NATO connection that now NATO is talking about getting in on Ukraine. I'm not trying to say that Putin is a good guy or that he's never done anything bad. I'm trying to say that literally every single thing that you could say that Putin has done that is bad, the United States government also does all the time. And from a geopolitics standpoint, the outcome of that is obvious. It started in 2014. And no shit, Putin was going to do something about it. Everyone knew that Putin was going to do something about it ever since 2014. But we didn't ignore it because we didn't think it was true. The United States did it because we wanted this outcome. We're going to briefly skip over the whole part where the Biden family, the Biden vice presidency, was actually very distinctly involved in the build-up to the Ukraine war throughout his vice presidency and all of the kickbacks that his family got from that involvement. And we'll skip straight to the money that is getting raked in by the military-industrial complex ever since the start of the Ukraine war in 2022. US government-approved arms sales just to NATO allies went from $15 billion to $28 billion. Private sales directly from military contractors to foreign governments went from $103 billion to $153 billion. And all the while, all the corporate shill-ass media reports it as though beating Russia in the arms market is part of a wider effort to isolate Moscow and its manufacturing capacity to weaken its forces arrayed against Ukraine. Quick, enrich the defense contractors for democracy. The only way to save democracy is to give billions of dollars to Lockheed Martin. Otherwise, Putin is gonna win. Except that Putin has said many times that he is willing to negotiate. He's happy to negotiate. He doesn't even want to take over all of Ukraine. He just wants that port right there and these Russians to be safe and NATO to stay the fuck away. He does not give a shit about Ukraine. He definitely doesn't give a shit about invading any other countries. He does not want that. Russia is the biggest country in the world by a long shot, and almost all of it is uninhabited. They have more natural resources than anyone else. They have tons of their own problems to deal with. And they certainly don't want a nuclear conflict with other major world powers. And to this day, basically everything that Americans have been told about this conflict is complete propaganda. And the number one rule of propaganda is you need a boogeyman. Once the Cold War ended, they needed a new one. So we had Osama bin Laden. Once Osama bin Laden ended, they needed a new one. So we went back to Putin. Nancy Pelosi actually tried to claim that pro-Palestine protests were Putin's propaganda machine. Anything that they don't like is because of Putin, which is why they came out guns blazing against this interview, because everything that they have been telling you about this is propaganda and lies.
Hey guys, if you want to watch more clips, click here.
And if you want to watch the full podcast, click right here.